To start, let's make sure we have our facts straight. We've got 3 different positive whole numbers, and they add to 10. And let's also make sure we understand what the question wants from us. Our goal here is to identify the value of the greatest integer in the list. The first statement, of course, tells us that the median of the integers in the list is 3. And of course, remember, a median, that's the middle value when your terms are arranged in order from least to greatest. In other words, if our median is 3, the other 2 terms in the list would have to add to 7 because we need a sum of 10. And of course, the 3 would be the term in the middle. Well, if the other 2 terms add to 7, they could be 1 and 6, or 2 and 5, or 3 and 4. And notice in each case, our middlemost value would be the 3. The problem, of course, is we have several scenarios here, and each one has a different greatest possible value. In other words, our greatest possible value could be 6, it could be 5. We just don't know what the greatest integer is given this information. That's why this is not sufficient information. That's why this is not one of our correct answers. The second statement tells us that the range of the integers in the list is 5. Remember, range is simply the distance between the smallest value in your set and the greatest value in your set. So if we have a range of 5, if the smallest value in the set were to be 1, the biggest value would have to be 6. Likewise, if the smallest value were 2, the largest value would have to be 7. If the smallest value were 3, the largest value would have to be 8. But notice this, if our smallest value is 3 and our biggest value is 8, those 2 values alone already add to 11, and we're told that the integers add to 10. These numbers are too big. In other words, our smallest value cannot be 3 and our biggest value cannot be 8. And likewise, if our smallest value is 2 and our largest value is 7, the third term in the set would have to be somewhere between 2 and 7, but 2 and 7 already add to 9. In other words, the 3 numbers in our set would add to something greater than 10, and that's why 2 and 7 can't be our smallest and biggest values. And what that means, of course, is that our smallest value has to be 1 and our largest value has to be 6, because those are the only 2 numbers whose range is 5, where the 3 numbers in the set don't exceed a sum of 10. And that's why the second statement is sufficient information. It is enough for us to figure out the value of the greatest integer in the list. Now, the last statement tells us that the sum of the greatest and least integers in the list is 7. In other words, those integers potentially could be 1 and 6, 2 and 5, or 3 and 4. Well, if the 2 numbers were 1 and 6, the third number, of course, would have to be 3, and we'd have a greatest value of 6. But if the 2 numbers were 2 and 5, again, the third number would have to be 3, and we'd have a greatest value of 5. And what we can see here is we don't have sufficient information to know the greatest value in the list. It could be 6, it could be 5, we simply don't know which one it is. And there you go. That's the reason here that only the second statement is sufficient for us to determine the greatest value in this list.